You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 18th of February 2026 on Monocle Radio.
Mark Zuckerberg takes to the stand in LA to defend social media. France's central bank tries to shore up the succession before the next election. And culture wars. Should politics bleed into sport and art? I'm Georgina Godwin. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you live from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guests Ash Bhardwaj and Marie Leconte will discuss the day's big stories. And we'll hear from Patricia Veal, co-founder of ACPV Architects in Milan. Do stay tuned. All that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. Hello and welcome, and a particularly warm welcome to my guests today. They are Ash Bhardwaj, who's a journalist and the author of Why We Travel. He's also a new father. We'll talk about that in a moment. And also Marie Leconte, who's a political journalist and author of, amongst other books, Escape: How a Generation Shaped, Destroyed and Survived the Internet. Welcome to you both. Ash, you just had a baby.
Indeed. He's our second. We've got a 3-year-old daughter and now we have a 6-week-old boy. So I've recently been in the trenches of nappy changing and waking up at night. So I am glad to be here and fairly coherent.
But so listen, your book is called Why We Travel. Can I just ask you why you think it's a really good idea to take a 3-year-old and a 3-month-old to Vietnam?
Once we'd had the first child, our daughter Lyra, I realised my travel was going to change. And I wanted to see if I could still keep being adventurous and still keep doing interesting travel for myself and my wife. But also because I think travel's such a great way to give children skills, competence and confidence. We took her to Morocco when she was 2 and she just had a great time bimbling about in the souk and just chatting to people. We also took her to New Zealand when she was 3 months old. So obviously she won't remember a huge amount of that. But I was hiking up mountains with her. We took her jet boating, and it's just a lesson that you can actually do more than you think you can, and you kind of cut away the unnecessary stuff.
Can I just ask you a question? What do the people on the plane with you on the way to New Zealand think about this?
3-month-old are pretty good. They tend to just sleep most of the time, and then if they get a bit upset, you pick them up and cuddle them. I don't know what a 3-year-old would be like all the way to New Zealand. I think she's pretty good. She's easy to entertain with stickers.
All right, but just I mean, this is a serious question because we've been complaining about children on the shows today. And how do you advise parents to deal with that? I mean, one heart goes out to the parent who's trying to calm down this screaming child, but it's unpleasant for the entire vehicle, the plane, the train, whatever it is. How do you advise people when you're talking about travel?
Well, I think we sort of have to deal with unpleasantness throughout the rest of our life, and we have different forms of tolerance at different times. And yes, it is horrible when you're on a plane with a screaming child, but it's also really awful for the parent. So I think the first thing is to have some empathy for the parent. Consider, is there anything you can do to help? Sometimes simply a different person can change the way a child is behaving towards something. If you are a parent travelling with a child, I think prepping them in advance, if it's something they're not used to doing, if they're not used to being on a train, if they're not used to car journeys, then getting on a 12-hour plane flight is going to be a bit of a shock for them. And then just making sure you've got lots of things that keep them entertained. And that, in our case, is lots of stickers, lots of colouring books, getting seats that have a bit of space around the front of them. Those are the things that I think can help a parent. And also just accepting that it's probably going to be a challenge.
Well, good luck in Vietnam. Now, you've been travelling too, Marie. You are, in fact, French-Moroccan. That's your background, I believe. Fluent in French, obviously. You've just been to Paris for an incredibly interesting reason.
Yes, a few weeks ago, I went to Paris to interview Gisèle Pellicot, the incredible woman. You may have seen the trial. I think it was quite hard to miss a few years ago. So this woman who, in her 60s, realised that her husband had been drugging her and raping her and inviting other men to rape her. And she decided sort of at the last minute to essentially waive her anonymity and kind of do this very public trial. And her message to the world was saying, actually, shame has to change sides. I have no reason to be ashamed as a rape victim. It's, those men who need to be ashamed. And obviously it turned into this incredible thing in France and then across the world. She's just released her memoirs, A Hymn to Life, which is actually very good. So I interviewed her and she was just, I had no idea what to expect, to be entirely honest, because she'd never really done big interviews. And, she had this strength and she was incredibly friendly and also just very open in saying, actually, what I want people to understand is that I did have a good life for most of my marriage. I wasn't a victim. I had quite a high-paying job. I had kids with this man I loved who actually helped me raise them and helped cook and clean, which for that generation wasn't entirely common. And, and obviously her life kind of changed and essentially disappeared in 2020. But she describes herself in the book as someone kind of going through a house that's burned down and kind of trying to go through the ashes, trying to find kind of pieces to hold on to. And that's how she talks about her past, which I found very poetic and beautiful. But no, I think the great news as well is that she has a partner. She has found love with this man called Jean-Loup, who I met. Tremendous, lovely man. They live together. He's a widower. And they essentially were, I think, brought together by mutual friends. And naturally at first, they thought, well, obviously nothing's going to happen. I'm just looking for a friend. And then one thing actually did lead to another. And they seem to be genuinely very happy together, which is the loveliest thing.
And she seems to be such an extraordinary woman. Maria, of course, I'm familiar with your journalism, but I know you're also, or you were, a prolific Twitter user. But you've left the platform now, was obviously clearly known as X at that time. You wrote a very powerful piece about it about a month ago. Tell us about the process of leaving and what finally pushed you out.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, it's fair to say that I posted quite a lot. I think I tweeted essentially all day, every day for over a decade, and it was entirely instrumental to my career, to a lot of my friendships, romantic relationships, etc. I think Twitter was a massive part of my life for a lot of my 20s and late teenage years. And what I think when Elon Musk bought it, at first I was, in denial. And I thought, well, actually, was it that famous quote of, we're not stuck in there with him, he's stuck in there in here with us. And I thought, actually, we had to stay and fight on Twitter as kind of liberals, as progressives. When Blue Sky launched, which was meant to be a kind of competitor to Twitter, I thought, well, I'll create an account, but without any kind of great enthusiasm. But no, in the end, what really made me go, oh gosh, I do just have to leave and never look back, was covering the US election. And so I'd been kind of traveling around the US for a few weeks. And then on actual election night, I was in Washington, D.C. And it was just, and I remember so clearly, I was writing, I was definitely a hostage to fortune because I was writing quite a fun sketch of kind of going from bar to bar around all the kind of bars where the part of the Hill interns and staffers kind of usually drink. So I thought actually it'd be quite a fun piece to be among the elites, kind of seeing how they reacted to the election. Obviously one of the most harrowing nights of my life in the end. And the next morning I thought, I just can't do this. I can't be on Elon Musk's platform doing his work for him, making him richer. So I completely left. And I now post all day, every day on Blue Sky instead. So there's been no personal growth whatsoever, I'm delighted to say. And I use Instagram quite a lot more as well. So my relationship with social media hasn't changed a lot. But yeah, I've just not posted at all on X in 18 months, I think now, nearly.
Wow. So today, Mark Zuckerberg is being grilled in front of an LA jury in what's been seen as a test case for social media companies. So the woman at the centre of the case sued Meta, Google, TikTok and Snap. She accused the companies of borrowing techniques used by big tobacco in decades past to target young people to get them addicted, all the while ignoring internal research that their products could cause harm to teens. Ash, what's your opinion on that? Is she right?
I think she's right about the techniques that were used by big tobacco, which is this idea that you try and disconnect causation from correlation. And in the past, when people were smoking, it became clear, by anecdote, it was clear that people were becoming ill as a product of smoking. Some evidence came out and the big tobacco companies basically said, just because more people are dying who happen to smoke doesn't mean the smoking causes it. It took quite a long time to overcome that through scientific evidence, or to convince people that there should be policies put in place and regulation put in place. And social media companies are doing the same thing. We were speaking about the impact of social media, and Jonathan Haidt, who has written this book, The Anxious Generation. And his research, which I know is contested in places, is that if you look at the levels of unhappiness as well as depression, many other kind of psychological illnesses, there is a correlation with social media arriving in a country, the arrival of smartphones, or even the arrival of fast internet, because then you can watch more video. And they're effectively trying to say the same thing the social medias have said with tobacco, that just because you're seeing a higher level of mental illness amongst young people doesn't mean it's caused by social media. There's lots of other things that are happening.
I mean, the Spanish government's the latest one that's voted to investigate social media companies. Australia, of course, has already done it. Is legislating against social media the right way to go about it? And if it had been illegal, would you still have done it?
So I think, that's a complicated question. My first thing is that I'm not convinced by governments across the world kind of rushing to ban social media for children and for young teenagers for a number of reasons. The first one is that actually, I'm 34 years old. I was part of the first generation to really grow up online. And I genuinely think that's one of the reasons why I'm actually, I've not let the internet kind of drive me insane, even though I spend a lot of time on it, because, I was able to phase myself in a way. And I think that, the idea of going from zero social media until 16 to all of social media is, but again, at 16, that's not an age at which I think you're entirely mature, etc. I think that's quite dangerous. But also, I worry that the governments kind of trying to implement that are essentially finding easy solutions to hard problems, because, I do absolutely believe that algorithmic social media is a problem, but I think it's driving everyone mad. I don't think it is just making teenagers more anxious or teenagers more radical or teenagers or. I think it's making everyone that. And I think, just saying, well, we'll just ban it for children is a way to say, so we'll have, so we'll be able to avoid actually, again, taking the hard decisions and taking on the kind of Silicon Valley giants.
Do you use? That sounds like I'm asking you about drugs. Are you on any platforms?
I do use social media, particularly Instagram, especially for the travel stuff. It's such a visually driven.
I love Instagram, incidentally, Georgina C. Godwin, because I once created my account and then I forgot the password. So I can't now have Georgina Godwin because that's taken by me. But is it as bad for us, Instagram?
I would like to be using it less. And I find that I compulsively turn to it in ways that I am not happy that I'm doing. And I put restraints on myself to prevent myself from doing that, turning off my phone for periods of time, putting a phone in another room, deleting the app every now and again, because I do find that I use it compulsively, both to put my own stuff out, but also just looking on there. And I'm convincing myself that I'm doing research about travel or strategic communications or conflict in Ukraine, which is largely what's on my feed. And at the same time, I'm not always sure if it really is a particularly good thing for me. So I would like to be using less. But the point you make, and it's one I hadn't really considered, is that by banning social media for under-16s, we're not making the hard decisions, which is forcing those companies to alter the way they're doing things. And one of the things that's coming up in this court case that Zuckerberg is supposed to be appearing at is that the social media companies are making these platforms deliberately addictive. And if you hear what they were talking about years ago and hear these members of these tech giants talking about things anecdotally, that's obviously what they're doing.
Yeah, and briefly, I will kind of do, I'm not being paid for this, but I think one of the really good things about Blue Sky is that there's no algorithm at all, which is really weird actually in 2026, because I think we've lost that habit. But it's a timeline of what people you follow have posted in real time, and that's that. And if you run out, you run out, and you never see anything from anyone you don't follow. And, and it's very self-contained. So it's a bit like being online kind of 15 years ago. And it's very nice. That generally is, I worry that it's going to be a bit boring. Actually, it's lovely.
So, of course, the problem really started when Elon Musk bought Twitter, changing not only the name, but the very nature of the programme. what happens when large institutions are subjected to the same forces? So the head of the central bank in France says he will leave before the election, the French election, to allow Emmanuel Macron to appoint his successor. And there are also reports that Christine Lagarde of the European Central Bank will do the same. So it seems this is an attempt to insulate those institutions from possible populist influences should the political leadership change. Is this a good idea, Ash?
Well, I think we've seen what happens if you don't do that. And we've seen already the President of the United States, Donald Trump, trying to enforce this on the central bank in the United States. But as we were mentioning earlier, we do have a case study of what happens if somebody doesn't do this, which was the Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who had the option to step down whilst during President Biden's term, but chose to stay on. And then when she did pass away, sadly, she was replaced by a justice elected by Donald Trump.
Is it Obama?
Oh, sorry, Obama's term.
But I think also it is worth saying that the populists have also been doing that. You know, I was in Hungary last year doing a report on the election, which is coming in 2 months. And, you know, and a lot of people there were saying, actually, even if the opposition wins, which obviously we hope they do, Orban has done such a good job of stuffing absolutely everything full of Orbanists, essentially. You know, every institution is kind of full of people who, like the governing party, who support Fidesz, that actually, you know, not a lot will be able to change. So I do think it's a slightly grubby thing to be doing, but also it is a slightly grubby game we are playing across the world at the moment. And, you know, and the other lot are doing it anyway.
I mean, could one argue, though, that these public institutions should reflect the current political leadership? After all, we're assuming that the leaders have been democratically elected and therefore represent the will of the people.
I guess with some of these institutions, looking again at the Supreme Court in the United States, once you start to move them in a particular direction and move them away from a balanced representation of what the nation wants, then they end up accelerating the move in a particular direction, which is what happened with the Supreme Court in the United States and, as you mentioned, Marie, with Hungary.
But it's also, I think, briefly, like, I think that logic kind of works if we only ever oscillate between the centre-left and the centre-right, or maybe the centre. But, you know, we are talking here quite often about fascist governments, kind of hard-right populist governments, who are seeking to entirely destroy those institutions from the inside. So it's not, I think, just a case of saying, well, actually, those institutions, quangos, etc., should reflect the mood of the country. It's actually, do we care about our democratic institutions and their well-being?
And I mean, it goes into the arts as well. Donald Trump's obviously taken over the Kennedy Center, or to give it its full name and correct designation, the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the National Cultural Center of the United States. It's meant to serve as a living memorial to JFK. So it's now the Trump Kennedy Center. It'll be remodeled, much as the White House, another building that belongs to the nation, has been. The idea, you know, if you think back to Obama or Biden or anybody, the idea that any future leader would do this simply didn't cross their minds, because why would it? I mean, should it have done, and should action be taken now by other countries to stop this kind of cultural takeover?
Well, I think it reflects the point about the difference between different sides doing it is there is an attempt by the current administration to effectively create a long-term institution of almost state capture, so that even if this current president disappears, it'd be very hard for things to move back in the other direction. And as you were saying, if it moves between centre-left and centre-right, that's fine. But this is something on the far right, really. How do you prevent it? I guess you can put legislation in place to try and prevent these sorts of things happening. But what Orban did in Hungary was he simply had such a large majority that even those any legislation being put in place to prevent that sort of thing happening, he was able to overturn.
And I mean, this is exactly what Trump has done. He's hollowed out Washington completely, hasn't he? All those big institutions. It is almost impossible to separate politics from culture and indeed sport. So Ukraine says it will boycott the Paralympic Winter Games opening ceremony because Russian and Belarusian athletes will be participating under their national flags. Now, they're encouraging other countries to also stay away. I noticed they're not actually boycotting the sporting events themselves. This comes off the back of the Ukrainian skeleton racer banned from participating in the Winter Olympics because he insisted on wearing a helmet depicting his dead colleagues, people who had died in the Ukrainian war. Ash, I know this is something you know something about. You're in the reserves. You've written a lot about war, and Ukraine is a particular interest of yours. But do you think that sport and politics can be separated in this way?
No, and the Olympics have never been separated from politics. They've always been used by the nations that are hosting them as a way to generate influence and credibility around the world, and they're have always been a place of performance and soft power and impact as a product of the people who compete in them and the people who win in them. And the reason why Russia was banned in the first place was at the 2014 Sochi Olympics. They basically used it as an opportunity to dope all of their athletes in order to win. And it is important, I think, to not legitimise Russia and Belarus by allowing them to compete under the national flags, because it just says that what they've done is okay. And what they have done by invading Ukraine is a massive transgression of the rules and norms of not just the rules-based international order of the West, but of the rules of the United Nations. And I do think there has to be some consequence to nations for doing that sort of aggression.
And I do think as well that, and I find it odd when people say, you should keep politics out of X or Y in the context of kind of international contests. Because, we had a similar discussion over Israel and Eurovision of people saying, we should leave politics out of Eurovision, whatever you make of the war in Gaza. Which I always found odd. Eurovision is obviously very political. You just have to look at the patterns of who votes for whom every single time, etc. It is very obviously, as you said, kind of part of the soft power and part of kind of like relationships between countries. And even, I think few listeners will probably know about this show, but I used to watch Arab Idol with my mum and my grandmother in Morocco, which is essentially a singing contest in the Arab world. And even that, you know what? The kind of, political kind of scheming between the Arab countries, every single season you'd see that as well. So I think, any kind of international contest will have politics in it.
I see what you're saying. I wonder if it's right that athletes who've trained for years and may have no involvement in politics at all should be penalised just by dint of their nationality.
They're not being penalised. They can still compete, just not under the Russian or Belarusian flags. So the athletes themselves are not being penalised by being allowed to compete. It's simply that you're not giving Russia and Belarus, the nations, the legitimacy that they seek. Right. And for Putin, his main strategic objective is to make the world respect Russia and think Russia is great again. It really hurts him that Russia is not allowed to compete under its national flag.
Let's look at where this spills into culture. At the Berlinale Film Festival, more than 80 current and former participants signed an open letter after the German festival jury president, that's Wim Wenders, said that they should keep out of politics. This was related to questions surrounding the Israel-Gaza conflict. And of course, we're seeing that particular issue crop up a great deal, with people cancelling each other over very strong views on this. Can art ever be a safe space, or is it meant to be exactly the opposite, in fact?
Oh, how long do you have? No, that's an incredibly tough question. I think my instinct would be to say that, you can't... Not all art, I think, is political, but I don't think you could... You can ask of art to be entirely apolitical is probably how I'd go about it. And I think, it's definitely up to individual kind of artists' choice whether they want to involve kind of contemporary or historical politics in their work and their practice. But I do think you have to be able to let them do it. So I think this idea of, we're artists, we kind of stand outside the world is nonsensical, in my opinion.
This letter also noted that the Berlinale had made clear statements in the past about other atrocities, including Ukraine. So are there double standards here?
Absolutely. It sounds like there's double standards. And for the artists themselves to be able to stand up and express themselves is what they do, whether they're musicians, whether they express themselves through a different form of art. So absolutely, the idea that they can express their political views seems to be okay. And if that means that they then get banned from the festival for wanting to express those views, that's the festival's choice. But I don't think this idea that you can separate sport and politics or art and politics really makes a huge amount of sense.
And it's really spilled over into the book world. We've seen this happen time and time again. Baillie Gifford had to pull all their funding from 10 festivals in Britain, putting many of them at jeopardy because a group of people said, no, they invest in fossil fuels, you can't have anything to do with them. I think there's quite a lot of pressure brought to bear on particularly young writers who feel like they have to comply with this pressure. And I wonder if it's fair on artists to put them in a position to have to walk away from publicising their work. work.
I don't think it's fair on the artists or the authors. If some people want to express their opinions, that's fine, but I don't think you should then be forcing others to do it. And of course, a lot of the authors or the artists or musicians who are being able to take those positions of great stance are ones who already have a lot of authority and maybe even a lot of wealth already. So it is very difficult, particularly for those young authors.
Absolutely. There's a really good Newcastle festival is a festival in Australia actually, and they've just, in the light of Adelaide Festival being cancelled, they've put out a thing saying that the artists are there on the strength of their work. It's their contribution to literary and cultural conversation, and that the audience are there to engage with literature that offers a range of perspectives. And it says that an invitation to the festival isn't an endorsement of the sentiments in the work or a writer's views and opinions, and that they support freedom of expression as a fundamental human right. And I thought that was a pretty good statement to put out there, just to say they're here. That doesn't mean we agree with them, but it's important that you hear lots of different views.
I find it hard to respond to this because I don't really know who they're talking about. Because I think again, even 10 years ago, I'd have, I think, wholeheartedly agreed with the statement and with the sentiment expressed in it. I think at a time when we have people like, Steve Bannon, whose game, and I feel like a lot of the right-wing populists, I think, essentially just game liberal institutions because all they need is a platform, and actually lots of, I think, liberals will say, but actually it's fine because sunlight is the best disinfectant and we have to invite them and debate them. It doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work. We've seen that Trump, won the election twice, and I think, populists are on the march more or less everywhere. So I think it doesn't work, but also this is what they do. That is part of the populist playbook. I think the platform is the entire point. So again, I think the statement, it depends on, if they're just talking about someone who happens to be a bit right-wing, then by all means they should be able to have a platform. But if it's someone who is, again, seeking to dismantle democracy, then my sympathy is limited, I think.
I mean, one of Bannon's favourite phrases is politics is downstream of culture. So he set out to change culture. That was the reason why he set up his website. I can't remember the name of it right now. But yeah, that's a specific objective. And it ties into what we were discussing earlier on about the institutions. Yes, absolutely, the populist right would completely try and capture those institutions if they go into government. But beforehand, they're quite happy to criticise the other side of double standards.
So sometimes things possibly should be banned on the grounds of, safety, price gouging, noise nuisance, and let's face it, taste. Transport for London, the body that regulates public transport in the British capital, has said that pedicab riders will have to be licensed. They'll need to meet English language requirements, pass a safety test, and hold a driving theory test certificate. Have you ever been on one of those rickshaws?
I have not, but I think I once had an incredibly absurd moment. So not long after the kind of end of the pandemic, end of the lockdowns, and I was going home, walking through Soho, which was still entirely kind of like silent and empty because, again, it was the first few nights. I think lots of people were still staying at home. And I was a bit tipsy walking home in the completely empty streets of Soho. And I turned round the side street and then there was this rickshaw, which, as I started walking, started playing like deafening level Rhythm of the Night. And I was the only person there. And I was like, am I having a complete mental breakdown? I have such a strong memory of like, is this it? Am I just having an episode? So I think that is my only pedicab related incident.
You must have come across them, Ash.
Yeah, and I find them incredibly frustrating when I'm trying to cross Waterloo Bridge on my commute because they tend to just park up in the bike lane and get in the way. And they are a really fun thing for people to do. The most common people to use them are people who've popped up to London to go and see some musical theatre. You see like mums with their kids on them pedalling around in central London having a great time. But the fact that sometimes they completely exploit people to charge them, in one instance, up to £480 for a 10-minute ride, I mean, it is literally should be criminal. So I'm quite happy to see
Is that a stupid tax, though? I mean, you need to check the price before you get in the thing, don't you?
But it's also just... It's just not nice. And I'm quite happy to see that kind of regulation come in on them.
Yeah, not banned, but just regulated. Isn't it like £1 a minute, I believe now? Which is still, I would say, that's not cheap.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I have to say, when you're in the West End, it does lift your mood to see a flash of pink neon and leopard skin and hear ABBA numbers being blasted out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It is good fun seeing around. And, like I say, you see these families on them having such a great time. It's really, really lovely to see. And you can see them enjoying having a great night out in London. It's good.
I am, however, going to take the tube home. just to make it clear. Marie Leconte and Ash Bhardwaj, thank you so much for joining us. Finally, we're going to swap from London to take you to Milan. Earlier today on our daily Olympics show, Monocle in Milan, which has been broadcasting all week from Milan's tallest building, the Allianz Tower, we heard from someone who has contributed significantly to the city's architecture and skyline. Monocle's Andrew Muller spoke with Patricia Veal, co-founder of ACPV Architects, and began by asking whether she could see anything she'd built from all the way up in the broadcast tower.
Actually, not from that side. This is north side.
Okay.
On the south side, yes, you can see growing up our tower, what we call the Torre Faro, which is on the south side of Milan. Is quite unique. You will see that the skyline is completely different, of course. So it's very visible.
Okay, I will ask you to point that out to me perhaps after the show. It's all the way over the other side of this floor. But on that thought, would you say that Milan does have a distinct architectural tradition? When you contribute to Milan's skyline, do you feel like there's something already there that you're tapping into?
Absolutely. Milano is a very special city in Italy, where modernity is very much embedded in the aesthetics of the evolution of the city. We call La Scuola di Milano a kind of design tradition that is actually maintaining very, very much intertwined rigor, elegance, architecture, interiors, sophistication in the relationship with the common ground, which is quite unique in the, I would say, in the urban tradition in Italy. Also because Milano is a very international city, very well connected with the rest of Europe. It's a very important metropolitan area in the plain, surrounded by mountains, close by the borderlines of the country. But it's a very small city, very dense. So it's the environment here is very much appropriate for very, very contemporary way of life in the urban environment, meaning what we call the 15-minute city, the walkable distances, the polycentric, and so on and so forth.
But for a modern architect, though, does Milan maybe give you a bit more freedom to operate than you might have in other Italian cities? Is there a feeling here of not being quite so trapped by thousands of years of history?
In a way, yes, again, because modernity is a tradition here in Milano. But I just wanted to say that the antique tradition and the historical city is not the only limit that you have. The urban environment is made by urban landscape. And of course the height of the building, the density, the size of the streets, the alignments, the street walls, the materials, the colors are part of the urban environment that we want to respect and somehow maintain. But the vertical city is becoming very much part of the idea of density here in Milano. Being a very dense city, the pressure of the economics, the culture, the capability of Milano to attract international champions in the economic world, like this one, for example, Allianz, is pushing the city towards the verticality, which is very interesting because it's very much different.
I mean, you are working on a number of projects right now which do involve buildings going very much upwards rather than outwards. I was looking earlier at something like the A2A Tower, which is looks kind of like a very modern idea of a very big lighthouse. What are the challenges involved with a building like that now? How are you managing to integrate it into what's already there?
The point with A2A tower was to free the urban soil. Why this? Because we are exactly on the edge of the Scalo di Porta Romana, where the Olympic Village is, by instance. And the connection between the center of the city, which is very close by, in that very specific position, and the south of Milano, was really the goal. So the morphology of the building came out from that idea. So it's not about being a tower and that's it. It's about being small on the touching the ground. But also the result is that the south side of Milano is now getting a new identity. Historically, the south side of Milano was very much the agricultural kind of edge of the city. We have a beautiful agricultural park down there. And of course, the mountains are on the other side. So the relationship of this very much non-homogeneous kind of environment, the flat land, the agriculture, and the mountains, was very attractive for the expansion of the city towards northeast and northwest. So the south side of Milan is the new far south, that we are pushing very much for several reasons. Of course, for example, the arena, the Santa Giulia Arena, is down in that direction,
which is where we were last night. In fact, but are you finding though that your clients are wanting different things from office space that they might have wanted when the company was starting out 25 years ago?
Of course, now the space where you work is not just a piece of real estate. It's very much a tool to enhance the capability of people to build up relationships, to go through research, to share, to enhance their skills, because whatever you can do for your day-by-day work can be done from everywhere. What needs to be done together is, of course, what is driving today the design of the office space. And it's not, I would say, any more related to efficiency. It's not anymore related to, I would say, the image of the company. It's more about the attitude. It's more about the sense of community, the sense of to be permeable to the world outside the company, to be capable to exchange and to be different and to change and to evolve. So it's not anymore to be established. It's something completely different.
That's Patricia Veal, co-founder of ACPV Architects, speaking to Andrew Muller. Our Olympic show, Monocle in Milan, will be live again tomorrow at 9 a.m. London, 10 a.m. in Milan, or wherever you get your podcasts. And that's all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. A big thanks to my panellists today, Ash Bhardwaj and Marie Leconte. Today's show was produced by Hassan Anderson and Chris Chermak. It was researched by Annalise Maynard. Our sound engineer was Elliot Greenfield. I'm Georgina Godwin here in London. The Monocle Daily is back at the same time tomorrow.